Howdy guys, we're back for episode 9 on Land Talk Podcast here, talking all things land, and today we are going to cover deals that we wish we would have taken. So I think looking back in time, it's kind of easy to look back and say, man, I should have bought that property. Prices, while they probably seemed high at the time, are low now. So I've still got my dad here. What are some properties over the years that you remember that you probably should have bought and didn't?
Yeah, I don't like to think about those particularly, and I tell people all the time of the several properties that I bought over a lifetime, which generally speaking have been smaller properties, 10, 20, 30 acres. I've never regretted buying any of those. The regrets I have are the ones I didn't buy, and I've got examples of that. Over one place we own there, I had a chance, and this was back not that long ago, actually. It's back. I'll say that back 18 to 20 years ago, I bought some property there, and I had another chance to buy the adjoining property next to me, which was about 35, 36 acres, I think. Anyway, I could have bought that property for $900 an acre, and for a couple reasons, I didn't do it. A great regret, big mistake. Should have bought that.
Yeah.
And then again, property joining some property that we own. There was a 14-acre tract and a 35-acre tract there that I had a chance to buy. And this was earlier than that. This was probably in the mid-'80s, maybe around 1990. I did not buy that anyway. Again, a huge mistake.
Yeah.
Huge mistake. So.
And I think it's easier to look back and realize, well, you probably should have done something. But kind of one of the notes I had here to talk about is how land always seems expensive. At the present, it's always going to seem expensive. It's always going to seem high. But very quickly looking back, typically the numbers get cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. So, kind of like we talked about last episode, I mean, you hear what folks bought land for 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago, or houses for that matter. I mean, you see a lot of folks that are 60, 70, 80, and they bought their first house for $20,000, and folks in my generation have to buy their first house at $400,000. So it just hurts a little more. But I guess all the point of that is, if the average home price in the U.S. is $420,000, probably in 50 years the average home price is going to be $800,000. I mean, it could be. So yeah, just looking at things, it's kind of 2020 is it's easy to look back.
Well, I do remember from hearing my parents talk when I was a kid or a teenager. I guess I was born in 1954, and I think that they built the house they lived in, I think, probably 1952 maybe. Mm-hmm. Anyway, the cost of that house in, let's say, 1952 was $5,000.
Right.
And that was for, they added on to it later, that was for a 2-bedroom home. A 2-bedroom, 1-bath home, $5,000. And I remember, they sometimes they had a hard time coming up with those payments.
Yeah, and we're kind of going back to pricing a little bit, but what was like an average salary? What was the salary, or what did people make per year around that time?
I think my dad at that time, and again, I think I heard he was making $2 or $3 an hour at that time.
Yeah, so 2,000 hours.
Yeah.
You're at $5,000 or $6,000 a year. Yeah. So that's the interesting thing is that, let's say you made $5,000 a year and you bought a $5,000 house. That's 1 year.
Correct.
1 year salary.
Correct.
And right now, I don't know what the average salary is. Let's say it's $50,000, or that would be 1/8 of the average house. So
kind of my point of bringing that up.
Yeah.
Things have changed so much over. 50, 60 years or whatever, 70 years is a long time, but comparatively, it's not that long.
Yeah. And I think looking, so in the last 10 years of doing, or 10 or 11 years of doing this, there was a couple places that I remember looking back on us. And I don't think it took me 10 years to figure it out, but very quickly I realized that was a good deal and I should have bought it. But I remember going east of Milano, and it's kind of far back down a dirt road, but there was 10-acre tracts there selling for $25,000. And I remember probably at the time even listening to those thinking, who would pay $25,000 for this? It's 9 miles down a dirt road. It's all wooded, but now looking back, even those tracks are always a little distressed because they are so far off the road and off the highway. But I mean, those tracks are still probably selling for $150,000. So 10 years, you're 7, 8 times the money. So, I tend to think of things as an investment just because you can see what they were able to be bought for and what you could sell them for now. But one other one that sticks out was this is probably 5 or 6 years ago. There was 100 acres, and I kind of feel like at the time we sold it, it was kind of almost setting the market a little bit. We were kind of pushing, and it sold for way more than I thought. But it was about $6,000 an acre for 100 acres. Really nice property. And looking back, I probably should have bought that one. Like I said, it was high at the time, but that property's at least double that now in 5 or 6 years. So, um, and there was not that you were looking at buying it, but I remember a property that you sold down on 908 that was 100 something acres, and that sold like 5,000 an acre. And looking back, that was a pretty good deal. So, but yeah, I think it's easy to look back and say, "Dang, we should have bought it," but there's always that present time saying, a little voice in the back of your head saying it's expensive, don't do it, it's risky, don't do it. And I think it's easier to look back and say, well, that wasn't risky, and I should have done it. And so yeah.
Well, I mean, in reality, just I mean, there's always a saying, for younger couple and stuff. If you wait till the perfect time to have kids, you will never have them because there is no perfect time. And I would say the same thing with any investment, particularly land. So if you're looking for the perfect time to buy, you may not come to that time.
Yeah.
You may have to. I'm not for overextending. I'm not saying somebody should overextend themselves because it's usually a mistake. What I'm saying is you may have to slightly overextend yourself sometimes to get what you want, and then 5, 10, 20 years down the road, you're very happy you did that.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah, and kind of one of the sayings that I hear all the time, and it kind of applies to the stock market more, but the saying is, don't it's not timing the market, it's time in the market. And I feel like if you're buying something with a long enough time frame, it would nearly be impossible to go wrong if you had a long enough time frame. So
I think it's very true.
yeah, and that's kind of one of the things looking back. I mean, um, I think you mentioned earlier, but any property that I would have listed 10 years ago would be an excellent deal today. Um, and I think that's just kind of human nature of kind of over making the present overly complex and making the past very simple. And obviously, the answer is it's probably always equally equally complicated. But I think that we just tend to do that to where it's easier to do nothing, and I think it's easier not to buy a property. It's easier not to have to make a monthly payment or be uncomfortable or whatever. And yeah, I think looking back at the past makes it so much easier, which is not true. It's always complicated, but
Well, again, I mean, there's always that saying, "No pain, no gain." I think that's true in everything.
yeah, no risk, no reward. So
Yeah, because I mean,
um,
anything that turns out good, at some point there may have been initially a little bit of pain,
yeah, yeah.
and but then when you reach the goal, whatever that is, you forget about that.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, I think there's probably several other places I regret not buying, but probably you could lump it into anything that I did 10 years ago. You could probably lump your stuff anything 20, 30 years ago. You could have literally probably bought any single property at any given price in 10, 20, 30 years. It would just be a ridiculous investment. So
Well, the place that we have joining the one piece of property there, it was a place I didn't want. It had a rundown house on it that had been not taken care of, abused. And luckily, in that situation, I did make the right decision. I didn't want anybody else to get the property and possibly cause me some problem. Anyway, long story short, I bought the property, and the property is worth, and that was bought about 9, 10 years ago. We have fixed up the house. The house is occupied now as a rent house. We're doing very well on that, and getting the money back that we put into it, and the land has increased a great deal just over 9 or 10 years.
yeah, and the funny thing is, like, so obviously we list and broker a lot of properties. The funniest conversation that I always enjoy having is when we list a property, and obviously our goal is to list the property as high as the market will allow, and hopefully make the most money for our clients. Um, but it never fails. We're gonna get a phone call from a neighbor, and what does the neighbor typically say about their neighbor's property? every time they're going to say, well, I could have bought that property for $500 an acre, and now it's $10,000 an acre. I will never pay that. And it's just kind of funny how folks justify the future based on the past. And my answer is the same every time. And I'm kind of being facetious, but I tell them you should have bought it. You should have bought it 20 years ago. But 20 years ago it was expensive, and the answer 20 years ago would have been, well, my grandpa could have bought that for $50 an acre, and I'm not paying 500. So you get into this recurring circular theme that never ends, and I think it keeps a lot of people from doing stuff. But anyway, that's one of my favorite conversations is from neighbors or local folks that just say, well, I could have bought it for this or could have bought it for that, and they didn't do it. So
and same thing. Somebody buys some land back in the day, whatever it was, and then 5, 10, 20 years later, they split up the land and they sell it for a huge, what people consider a very high price per acre. And as you say, somebody will always say, well, I could have bought that land, or this guy bought this land for this price. The question is, well, why did you buy it?
Yeah, and the answer was that was high at the time. And like I said, hindsight's 20. It's easy to look back and say, man, that was cheap, but at any present time, it's always going to seem high. And I think that's the nice thing about a market is that the market, it's fair, it's unbiased, it's going to do what the market is going to do what it wants to do to get the property the highest value. And so that's kind of one of the nice things about real estate is it's
and markets, be the real estate market or any market, markets have no mercy.
Yeah.
They don't care if you're rich or poor,
Mm-hmm.
if you're in need or you're not in need. It doesn't matter. The market is the market, and they don't discriminate to the rich people. They don't discriminate to poor people. The market is the market, and it's cruel and merciless, and it should be because it protects us all.
Yeah, it protects people on both sides of the spectrum. In the other part of that conversation of somebody calling me saying, well, I could have bought this for this, the next best part of that conversation is when they call me back 3 months later and they're kind of digging, saying, well, did the property sell? I'm say, I actually did sell, and we got close to list price or whatever. And like I said, they're probably really mad after that. But they're wishfully thinking that they can come in and scoop up a deal based on what they could have bought it for 10 or 20 years before. But anyway, it's always kind of fun to have the conversation.
And I'm kind of dealing with something, and I won't go into detail about it, but there's a property that come up for sale very near me, and years ago I could have bought that property for really nothing compared to now.
Yeah.
Well, but I mean, I didn't do it, so
yeah.
I'm not in any way jealous of the people who did.
But is the price from that time stopping you from trying to buy it today? No.
No.
I mean it's just kind of a fallacy that I think humans fall into, and I think really it's just kind of justifying inaction from the past. But anyway, we always get those conversations. But on the flip side, it's kind of interesting to hear, looking back in time, what that stuff was worth, and you think, man, I don't know how it could have ever been that cheap, and why doesn't everybody have 100 acres? Because you used to be able to buy it for however much money it was. But
I bought a place at that time. In reality, I should have extended myself and bought 3 places like that.
Yeah.
And I didn't do it, and I do have regrets, but the property is worth way, way more than it was then, and I'm happy for the people that did buy the property.
Yeah.
They're being rewarded for what they did.
Yeah. And all that's being said, I think if you're a buyer in the market, now's always the best time. And I think you can try to micro time that and pick a slightly lower time, but the main thing is, take the risk, buy the property now, hold it long enough, and you're going to be fine.
No,
so
the kicker is if you're waiting for the price of property or whatever to go down, it may not happen.
Yeah.
Now it could, but what if it doesn't? And then prices continue to increase, and then by the time the market does adjust, the price is still way higher than you could have got it for now.
Yeah, and I think that's my point. Of a lot of people sit on the sidelines waiting to get in the game, and for a lot of folks, they never get in the game. That's the end result is they never get in the game. They never buy a property, and whatever dream they have is now double, triple, quadruple what it could have been. And if they would have just jumped in at any certain time with a long enough hold time, they could have made a good deal. Like I said, short term maybe no, but I think looking at these numbers we talked about in the last podcast, if you've typically in 5 to 10 years, those numbers are going to be larger. Now we could hit a dip, and it could be down for 2 years. If we go back to 2008, I mean, I'm sure property value stayed down for 3, 4, 5 years after that. But then you get an event like COVID that takes up way more than that took down. So,
well, the couple of small properties I mentioned in the other podcast, I did buy those on a high point of the market. But like I say, years later, it makes no difference.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if I'd have bought it at a low point or a high point. The difference in the price now is so great.
Yeah.
I don't think it's not a concern.
Yeah. But yeah, I think we all regret not buying places. And like I said, there's a few here that we talked about. But I mean, it's the best way to not regret it is to buy it. So
that's it. I mean, it's just a decision. If you want a piece of property for an investment or a piece of property that you can enjoy and then it becomes an investment later, in my opinion, the best time to buy is right now.
Is right now. Yeah.
Because we can't go back.
Yeah.
And me or no one else can in any way predict the future.
Yeah, and I don't want to go down this rabbit hole, but rates are still a little high right now. But I think there's going to be time to refinance things. I think rates will drop, and kind of the slang saying is marry the property, date the rate. So I mean, you can get the property you want and find a rate that fits you better. Hopefully later, like I said, I think they're just going to come down.
Sure,
but
particularly the farm lenders, that's an option every day. You can go in there and rewrite the loan.
Yeah.
Because it's the farm lenders are owned by the borrowers. They're not trying to make. They have to make an operating expense, but they're not trying to make a profit.
But I think right now with the market being slightly down from what it was a few years ago, I mean the supply is higher, the demand is lower, so now you can go out and compete with less people. And actually, right now you can make some deals on properties. There's some folks taking lesser offers, and what I'm saying is it's probably easier to compete on, even though the properties seem expensive. It's always easier to get a better deal when you're competing with less people. That's the bottom line.
Well, compared to 2 years ago or a year and a half ago, now is a great time to buy.
Yeah, there's just less people fighting you for it. So the rates are higher, and you're going to pay more on a monthly payment, but you're fighting less people. You can probably get a little better deal today on the property, and then hopefully refinance later. But yeah, I mean, obviously the best way not to regret it is to do it. So. But yeah,
I mean, both of us can look back at properties that we sold a year and a half, 2 years ago. The properties are down in price in that time.
Yeah.
So I mean, a great time to buy.
Yeah. And some of those folks from 2 years ago bought on the high, and they're looking right now and they're saying, man, if I sell my property, I'm going to lose money, and that may be true. Right. But like I said, with enough time, yeah, I mean, all that's going to wash away, and I think ultimately you're looking at some sort of gain. Probably
3, 4, 5 years from now, they won't be feeling that way.
Yeah.
They will be like me. They won't care what they gave for the property.
Right. Yeah. So that wraps up episode 9, talking about properties we wish we would have bought. There's always going to be a few of those out there. But if you want to buy land, check out our website. If you want to sell, check out our website too. We hope we can talk to you down the road. Thanks.